Welcome to Pennsylvania in Focus. I'm Eliana Kernodle. Pennsylvania held its primaries this past Tuesday, and there were relatively few surprises. Joining me to tell us more is the Center Square's Anthony Hennon. Anthony, give us the rundown. What happened on Tuesday?
Yeah, so Pennsylvania was not expecting to have any dramatic changes or surprises, and that's generally how it looked. Joe Biden received about 93% support among the Democrats, and Republicans followed Donald Trump with about 83% support. In the U.S. Senate race that's coming up, both Democrat Bob Casey and Republican Dave McCormick, neither of them had any challenges, so they cruised to their qualifying for nomination. And so nothing too big here. Well, what was good to hear was Pennsylvania Secretary of the Commonwealth, Al Schmidt, said that it was a relatively calm and successful primary election. When we've looked in recent years, we've seen a lot of problems related to voting or mail-in ballots or et cetera, et cetera. Back in 2020, we had 3,600 calls to the voter hotline. This time around, the Pennsylvania Department of State had about 600 calls, so a significant decrease. And Schmidt said that he believed it demonstrates Pennsylvania's voters overwhelmingly encountered and improved voting experience this year. So that was good to see. It seems like the more that we've done, these mail-in ballots and other things, rules clarification, law clarification, things have gotten smoother as people get more experience. There were a couple notable things happening, though, around Philadelphia in the Democratic primary. State Representative Kevin Boyle lost his bid, which is not necessarily a surprise, simply because Boyle has been the center of some attention, where an arrest warrant last week was issued for Boyle for violating a protection order, which then on Monday, the Philadelphia Police Department canceled that arrest warrant, saying it was no longer valid and was not fairly issued. So instead of Kevin Boyle, the Democrats are nominating challenger Sean Doherty for that seat, which is generally reliably Democratic. So it's looking like Boyle will be out, but probably not change a balance shift of power in the Pennsylvania House. What was surprising, though, was out in rural south central Pennsylvania, State Representative Jim Gregory actually lost his bid in the primary. His challenger, Scott Barger, pushed him out 55% to 45%, and he will likely run unopposed in November, which is interesting because Gregory had some level of statewide renown for his advocacy against childhood sexual abuse and also dealing with opioid addiction and substance abuse. So that was a bit of a surpriser, which popped up here. But generally, we haven't seen too many surprises around in Pennsylvania. Just with how late in the game its presidential primary comes around, the chips had already fallen and it was settled. But what was good to see is we're not seeing as many issues with voting as before, or as many potential legal challenges.
And how was turnout for this election?
So turnout was low, which is not necessarily surprising for a primary, though it is a bit surprising in a presidential year. But even compared to 2020, voter turnout was down. We're looking somewhere around 30%. It looks like that was a turnout. So it seems like, it's hard to say what sort of apathy is driving this, of whether, this is kind of, Pennsylvania, the presidential nomination has already been decided. So maybe that led to fewer people turning out for local and state races. Maybe a lack of controversial things on the ballot kept that low, or it could also just be voter apathy toward President Biden and former President Trump being on the ballot. It's hard to say exactly. I'm sure it's probably a mix of all of the above here. But Pennsylvania, even compared to 2020, was surprisingly lagging on the vote. Perhaps in November, we'll see a bit of an uptick here since, a lot of these primaries were not necessarily contested, or there were not a lot of big controversies there, but it was definitely a dip compared to 4 years ago.
Well, Anthony, thank you for your insights on this story. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com.
Some people would call him a loser. He ran for state office. He was beaten. He started a business. He failed. He ran for Congress. He lost. He was nominated for vice president. he lost again. But he knew only those who never tried are the real losers. And Abraham Lincoln was no loser. Persistence. Pass it on. From the Foundation for a Better Life. Add value